Over the last couple of days, you have heard from renowned experts and researchers on land farming in its different forms. And you heard incredible evidence how land farming brings an amazing contribution to sustainable agriculture. In this last session of the symposium, what we're going to try and answer is probably still a lingering question. Is land farming's contribution to more sustainable agriculture an aspiration or a reality? We really live in the world where yesterday's urgency of an environmental challenge is not as important as today's one. There seems to be environmental challenges arising every day. And we have this urgent need to find out, how to grow food while really having very little impact on the planet as well as biodiversity, and have some economic benefit for our farmers. As stated in Farm to Fork and biodiversity strategies, there is a need to transform the management for increasing carbon capture and storage, regulate GHG emissions while also enhancing biodiversity. Seems quite a big task. And it does look like, from listening and reading, that land farming might be just the panacea we need with all its benefits to solve all of our problems. It will improve soil health, have a positive impact on the biodiversity, contribute to the climate change mitigation, and bring economic benefits to the farmers. But is it really a reality or an aspiration? My name is Aurelija Povelaitė, and I work at the Research Council of Lithuania, and I will be moderating this last session of today. And it is my great pleasure to introduce 4 panel members that we will try to find out what they think of the land farming overall, and to bring all this knowledge that you have shared over the last couple of days. So, let me welcome first Jevgenija Sturytė from Norwegian Institute of Bioeconomy Research. Carsten Stefan Malish of Aarhus University in Denmark. Žydrė Kadžiulienė from, well, you know Žydrė, all of you, EGF. And Nick van Ikeren, Senior Researcher at the Louis Bolk Institute, Netherlands. Oh, we are missing the chair, but that's fine. I will stand. I wanted to sit down, but that's okay. And there's a chair for me. Oh, thank you very much, Andreas. You're a gentleman. You see, that's what they said about the community. This just proves itself. Thank you. We need microphones, no? To get better. Yes. So just at the kind of kick off this panel discussion, I will ask each of you, do you think land farming is a reality or aspiration that contributes to sustainable agriculture? Just quick yes or no, and you will see where I'm going with this. Nick, let's start. Yes. Žydrė? Yes. Yes? No? Yes. Okay, well, we can all go home now. There's nothing else to discuss. Can I see raise of hands who think it's still an aspiration? Okay, there's a couple. Aspiration, yes.
Pure aspiration.
Yes? Yeah. Not curious. Okay. Well, I mean, that's it. There's nothing else to discuss. So even I had the poking question to ask why and how, but let's start with the different angle. So it is a reality, and we can see it actually working in practice. It's a very holistic method, but how does it affect other means of farming, for example, organic farming? Can it work in collaboration with other types of farming? And if not, what we can do about it? Who would like to start? Oh, okay, you kick off. Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you for the question. And it's not easy to answer where we can start, but it depends where you are, what is the situation at this moment, and where you want to go. And I think I'm coming from Norway, and we have a lot of lakes and grasslands, and maybe it's our priority, and maybe not. But anyway, we see that we have in much better environmental situation than many other countries in Europe. And probably that it is because we can thank this a lot of grasslands, because our production pillar is milk and meat production, and it's about 80% of our agriculture production goes to that. And therefore it may be for us very little have to be changed to gain the goal. But I say for Europe, many times we have the same discussions in our country, and we also worried how can we get these changes to be in reality. Then always they say we have to remember where are you. If you are in the, I'm sorry, for Germany, the Netherlands, or France, or so on, then you have other problems. Only really you have to think how you will go back to mixed farms and how to introduce more lace and mixed lace. And it's not only solving during the one night, it is also connected to your economy, your many questions. And we sometimes have to think how farmers think. It's very easy to speak, but it's very difficult to come in action. And I think that sometimes we need more maybe to work than to talk. Yeah.
Nick, I would like to go to you because Netherlands have been mentioned, so please.
Yeah, I can add to this. I mean, I think for the transition to more sustainable systems, it's necessary. We see it in the Netherlands on places, a lot of farms who specialized from the 60s onward, which were on clay soils. They were mixed farms, they specialized to arable. Lay farming was not in the rotation anymore, and nowadays these farms say, okay, they converted to organic, but they say without lays we couldn't do this. Without lays, for example, certain crops, they couldn't cultivate them because you lose your soil quality, and yeah, so actually in this situation for organic farms, it's a necessity. Yeah.
And is the same situation in Denmark, Carsten, would you say?
Well, I would argue, well, yes, the situation is of course similar or comparable, but since your question initially asked about whether there are trade-offs or whether this introducing grassland takes something away from other systems, I don't actually see a competition there at all, because I mean, as Nick said completely correctly, I mean, for organic grasslands, for organic production systems, it's essential anyway. But I mean, grasslands are not a monolith, and we have heard about lots of different uses of grasslands as part of this conference as well. So the grassland will fulfill different functions in different systems, but it can contribute to each and every one of them. And it's not a black or white picture. There are things that can achieve in each and every one of them, and there are different problems in each and every one of them as well. But I clearly can't think of a situation where it's taking anything away from. It can always add different facets, but it's always adding something. It's just something different at each time.
But even so, there's the great benefits. You're all saying it's working. Why it's not widely adopted? You know, even you said it's, you know, a lot of talk and it's not much doing. So where is the issue?
If I may start with that one, because actually I thought it was also a very good example. We visited the Circle Farm yesterday, and they just started, I think 3 years ago, having cattle on their grasslands. And you saw exactly the same situation that we saw in Kiel as well when we started introducing cattle to a grassland. It really takes a long time to learn how to manage these things. Once you have figured it out, it works very, very well. But even at Kiel University, when we got our cattle farm of over 100 Jersey cows, we had all the expertise, we had the network, we had everyone. We were like, it was the premium situation of access to knowledge, and still it took us 2 or 3 years to find out a way to manage the system that we always have highest palatability, high forage quality, and that you always knew which swards to harvest for silage because they were too tall, which ones to graze next, etc. All of this takes time to learn and to implement and to get a feeling for that. So also our swards were always too undigestible for the first 2 years. And if I were a farmer, that's a great risk, right? Just losing profits for 2 years. and also changing to these systems from going to a block carving system, if you don't have that, that's really a lot of work, and it's an economic risk in the beginning which pays off in the long run, but it's not easy getting there.
Peter, what do you think about kind of from the Lithuanian perspective?
Yes, I think that different situations in different countries, of course, and a little bit pity that more and more farmers choose crop production. They do use farming system without animals, so it's they understand that lay farming or grasses, legumes are important in the system, in the crop rotations, but in practical to use, it's not the same to understand and to use.
There was a lady who kind of very slightly raised her hand. No? No? Okay, fine. I'm not going to the lady who thought it was just an aspiration who blew you. But if you have any questions as well, please raise your hand. This is the last opportunity to ask the panelists. There won't be any more official sessions, so if you have a question to the panel members, please raise your hand and you will be given a microphone. So there was a mention as well of farmers. You know, and Gita, you alluded to that. You know, when you say to the farmer, you're not going to have benefits for 2 years, and you have to have an investment rather than reap the benefits. You have this cultural misunderstanding why they are doing it, isn't it? Why it's worth doing it? Why it's worth thinking in the future? And we know in some farming communities, the economical benefit comes first before thinking about the actual other benefits that this can reap. How can we teach, or what is the secret of communicating this message of importance of lay farming to the farmers? Do we need better structures nationally, like incentivization schemes from the government, policy support, you know, use in some countries structural funds to incentivize different ways of farming? Nick, what do you think?
I think it's with the new cap. I think it's stimulated already. In the Netherlands, there are subsidies now for having a crop rotation, and on the other side, farmers are also, when they want this subsidy, they are obliged to do it. And so I think it's a way to promote, and I think a good thing is to show positive experience, positive cases where you can show, okay, on this way you can practice it. Yeah.
I'm not an expert on that, but just to add on to what Nick said, it has been I think I observed that indeed that learning or taking the farmers a bit by the hand in that transition phase, it can be really, really fruitful. And I mean, in Kiel was, for example, involved as well in the Euro Dairy and Research for Dairy project, where Aarhus University is also involved, lots of European countries are involved, where they have lots of these farmer exchanges, and they have northern German farmers going to Ireland to see how they're doing it, and vice versa, and there's lots of exchange. And I think that's, from my observation, really efficient to not have a scientist tell you what to do, but you can really see it on another farm in practice and talk to a farmer using the same language without, like, I don't mean to sound derogative in any way, right? I mean it as a positive way. Yeah, exactly. So just to really see it is working in practice, and they can talk about the economics about it and about the obstacles they faced in the implementation phase. And I think this is really, really helpful in the transition phase. And I know lots of structures being like the Grassland Center in northern Germany, etc., where they build up, where they're trying to do exactly that. And I think this is a really powerful tool to connect farmers who want to implement, so that they know the pitfalls best, and they can then really help each other in the transitional phase. And I think that, together with the legislation, of course, that demands the change, is really important to make sure that it can be implemented successfully. There is no aversion to that trend.
Even what do you think?
I fully agree with you, and we have some similar experiments in Norway. But I will say that I think the first of all is knowledge for everybody, not only for farmers, researchers, but also for society. Because there is very often we are making decisions and talking, but we very rarely asking why we do it. Do we understand what we do? We are very easy to using word for everywhere, sustainability. I'm sometimes thinking, is it really we can use for everywhere? Now kindergartens have to be sustainable, and I don't know what will be next. But therefore I think that communication is very important, and communication have to be with simple words that everybody understands, and not by economy, who everybody wondering what is it, and because we are depending on each other. And today we see that the world is connected much more as we thought before. And therefore I think that all these systems, and of course money, like ABBA song many years ago, it's really very important. Because we see, it's maybe also with Lace, but in Norway it's starting with talking about pollinator strains. And for some years farmers just wondering, okay, I'm losing part of my area and so on. But when the government starting to pay, it's wonderful to see how many lost these stripes. But my question, of course, they start to understand, but first of all is knowledge, good communication, and of course also rule on law decision makers, that they have also much more understand what they are doing, and not just to follow some writers in newspapers, bloggers, and everywhere, yeah, and because information very much, and you have to think first also of all to think, is it for me or not for me? Yes. Maybe too much, I think.
That's absolutely, I really like money, so. But Žydre, sorry, yes, the question, please go ahead.
I have to admit, I'm coming from a very strong animal perspective. And when I look, for example, what's happened now and the EAP on the new research, we are now starting developing new topic like artificial meat and so on. And I'm scared of that, because I consider that animals should be fed on grass-based. Lay will play an important role. And still, I listening to your presentation and see, okay, there is both. Actually, we're working on arable land and so on. I'm still missing a bit the co-creation between your work and the animal world. Is my analysis wrong? And if not, what is missing on your perspective? I already had a discussion with Agnes on the strategic level, but if we decide on the top level, this will not bring the good effect. We have to know from you, from your perspective, what you need actually to implement and to make really co-creation for the animal perspective. Sorry for the long question.
No, that's a very good question. And did you say artificial meat?
Yes, it's just an example.
Okay.
That I don't want to hear, please.
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to answer the question on co-creation, but I think what is happening now, I was this morning discussing it with Olivier with breakfast. What is happening now that we are calculating with models how we can feed the population, and these models are quite simple. It's already complex, but they don't, for example, look to soil quality. And they think very simple, okay, we make it arable. And of course, when you do 10 years, it's not a problem, but after 10 years, what's then? And I think there, the discussion, then you need, for soil quality, you need a ley, and you need animals to use it. And maybe you can also feed this grass to a artificial meat factory, but I think you need a grass ley in this perspective, and you need animals to utilize it. So I think what we need is showing policymakers, but also other researchers, that the agronomy, and that it's important that a grass ley is improving the soil quality, and that it's needed in a crop rotation for food production.
I won't be able to answer your question, but I might give you a bit of hope, because at least it has been my observation that it is changing quite a lot in the past. For example, since I came to Denmark initially, the major funding bodies in Denmark, Novo Nordisk Foundation and Willem Foundation, etc., they don't fund research at all anymore if it involves animals, because they say our future is plant-based, and they are the biggest, well, I would guess they are the biggest funding bodies by far in Denmark. So that's sort of the priority from them, and I mean it's perfectly fine. They're a private company, they can set their priorities. They get, like, there is a disconsent among scientists. There is they do say we need mixed systems, etc. But this is their direction. Since I got there, I came obviously from the Kiel background, so I just got out of those and realizing the importance of LAYS for nutrition, animal nutrition, etc., and having mixed systems for closed nutrient cycles, etc. But when I got there, I was running a bit against brick walls. I always tried to contact the animal nutritionist people, and they said, yeah, but I mean, you can't feed grass to the cows, right? I mean, they have to really get the most digestible food. It's like, but since then, one of the main things that happened was actually the Ukraine crisis, right? With the prices for cereals going up, and a big discussion in the general population as well. I realized that more in Germany than in Denmark, but as well, is it still sustainable to feed our grains to the animals if they rather can eat human indigestible protein and convert it into, and make an additional benefit out of that? And is it still sustainable to feed 40 or more % of our grain to the animals rather than consuming it ourselves? And at least in Denmark, I've now experienced quite a shift in the discussion, and at least now we start new projects together with the animal nutritionists, and the collaboration is getting much closer. So I do think it is a time where actually this paradigm, at least in the scientific community, is changing, and the collaboration is becoming more closer. But I mean, I am only able to give you indications from a limited sample set. So it might be different elsewhere, but it might give you hope that elsewhere this might change as well.
Gilles, would you like to comment?
I agree with what was said, but I also want to, I agree with Jevina that very important is how thinking society, and we also have to work with society, and I think it's a good initiative is in European Horizon program. They will could to show how important, for example, different lay farming systems in different countries. So we have all to do something in the future, researchers, advisors, farmers, and society together for efficient solutions.
Any comments? On co-creation, because you still haven't answered the question how we can co-create. Because clearly is that researchers can't work in the silos to answer the global challenges that this is, isn't it? The sustainability, sorry to use this word, but in this case it is sustainable food chains, and so yeah, maybe cooperation is needed, but why we're still in most cases working in silos?
Yes, I think that, how to say, I always think about many things from my perspective or people perspective, and you think, I think that actually, originally, we are very lazy altogether. If we could, I think we don't work so hard. But our generations have worked very hard, and we have forgotten this. And therefore I think that I will say maybe very, very strange thing, but if my grandmother and grandfather could see this and understood what we are talking about, I think they could understand anything about it. Because that time people work a lot, and today people are actually have time to do very interesting things and to understand, and it's needed and everything. But I think that we very many times exaggerate. And what is very important, always remember about balance. And it is in everywhere. In soil you have to have balance between nutrients. In plant communities you have to have balance, you also have to have balance between us in people. And if we remember this, then I think it could be much things to solve much easier. But we forgotten, because we always have to show how strong we are. And therefore I think about animals, and I think it's very scary, because in Norway, as I said, we rely also of milk and meat production. And now we know that the numbers of farmers who have dairy farms, and they are decreasing. And there are several reasons for that. They are saying, and actually, who are, maybe I'm going to away from question, but this, you said artificial meat and everything, now is very popular to be plant eaters and so on. And municipality of Oslo, they are saying from next year, kindergarten schools will not get meat at all. And he was very proud to say this. But at the same time, we have to think what we are doing, and we have to stop. But it is possible to stop. But because if we, how to say, don't have any more so many animals in the system, not enough milk production, meat production, one day we can awake with very ill society. Mental, also physically, because plants can give us a lot of proteins. But what we can find in meat, we cannot, how to say, to constitute with that what we give for pulses and so on. And there is a big challenge, because at scale, if you are grown-ups, you can do what you will, you can maybe go and don't eat many days and so on, but if it's coming to children, it is all the time under development. And you never know what kind of consequences of this be. Therefore, I'm very surprised that like medical personnel, research are very quiet about it and not talking what kind of consequences it can be. Therefore, I think I'm very happy that we have understand that methane emissions, every emissions, and actually we start to understand that it is natural circles what we have to accept. But of course, we can even to more get or less get, but we cannot, as for example, we saying sometimes in Norway, zero emissions. How it is possible? Then I say you have to kill me. Yeah, then it will be zero. But otherwise you cannot get zero. You can be neutral. But and sometimes they are using so I'm sorry, not correct terms. But we are repeating. Therefore, I sometimes think that we are not so much different from sheep, because what one is doing, we also others do it. Yeah, but it's maybe not professional.
Look at that. So co-creation definitely yes. That's But I agree about the use of terms, and we talked about the language that we have to use when we talk to the, it's a different language, to the policymakers, to the farmers, to the public, why this and that is more important, or well, it's a balance as well, isn't it, of the different elements. And as you talked about animals and meat eating, it is a balance. Yeah. It is a balance. So, slightly touching on that then, what is the role of the researchers? What is your role then, and whom you have to convince, like lay farmers really have to take on? What else can you do? It's great to see, you know, as a lay reader, as somebody from the street, it's great to see all the research you guys doing, but what's the benefit, and when I will see that benefit? So what is other role than doing your research? What else can you do? Oh, that's a good question. Right, who shall we start with? Carsten, would you like to start?
No, but I would argue that one of the first things is really, well, obviously the first of our roles is to provide the facts, to lead a discussion that is not based on emotions on either side, but is sort of just providing the pathway. But ultimately, I think what we need to really work on is science communication, because I mean, I'm still very young, right? I'm really sort of still new to the science community, but still I've experienced it a lot of times that messages are vastly over or misinterpreted in the media. And I mean, we realized that in Kiel as well, right? When we did research on the methane emissions from grazing cattle, and we tried to reduce them. And there was a press release of a quarter of a page, right? And all of the news outlets, it got so much media attention, but they all, particularly in the farmer outlets, like the media, the newspapers that the farmers read, it was grossly misinterpreted, and the comment sections were going nuts, and they were like, oh, now they all want us to become vegans, etc., right? And now these scientists again, you know, that wasn't our point anywhere near at all. We were actually trying to enable people to still continue eating meat or drinking milk with a sort of good conscience, right? But people have images in their mind that are sort of predefined, and then they just grasp individual things and they jump at that. And I think one of the main issues where we are really struggling, and I mostly speak for myself, I can't speak for everyone, but science communication, I think, is really something that more training is needed in, to really make sure that the right message is actually landing and that it's not used, taken out of context, restructured, and just people are running wild with it. And I think that
Nick, just as well, the same question, but it's a slightly different angle. The policymakers are reading the same news articles, so the snippets of research that has been produced and the headlines. So how can you go then and convince them that really lay farming is the policy direction we need to go, when actually the newspapers might be saying it's devastating for the farmers' economy?
Sometimes, I mean, we have now the discussion of reduction of animals in the Netherlands, and then we have also these discussions also with policymakers, and then I'm asking them, when you drove over here, you saw the greenery, and imagine that's all brown. And then they say, why that? This farmer will keep his grassland with 80,000 euros per hectare, he will keep it. No. He will plow it, he will keep potatoes or maybe bulbs, put a lot of pesticides, and maybe this kind of communication we have, discussion. I was thinking about your former question. I think we discussed already about risk, and I think farming it's all about risk. I'm always saying to my colleagues also, the word risk, it's never mentioned, but actually 90% of our job is about risk. And I think we have to show with our results what are the risks or what are not the risks, and I think we have to show the short term versus the long term, and I think that's important what we can do as researchers.
About research, I think that we have too short research, and we publish results very quick. Because I also had my talk about long-term experiments, and then we actually can see what happens in the nature, what happens when we are cultivating soil, when we have grasslands, when we have arable land. Then we can make conclusions, but it at least needs maybe 50 years. We have experiments 100 years old. In United Kingdom, we have experiments which started in 1800. And then you can make conclusions, especially today when we are talking about or trying to predict climate change and what will be in 2050 and 2100. And I sometimes think it's very nice for these climate researchers, because nobody will be at that moment, it will be 2100. But at the same time, I think that for researchers, we have to do honest work. It is the most important that we are honest and we are really saying what we get. Because we always make hypotheses, and of course we don't know if this will be agreed, that what we have thought in the beginning or not, but we also have tell to others, researchers and society, when we don't succeed, and that it's not what we thought in the beginning. And always I think that it's better to stop and say, excuse me, but I think that model what we have in Norway, that we collaborate a lot with consultancy or advisory service. We have very close collaboration, and they are also again have close collaboration with farmers. Then we think that the way to bring our knowledge to them is quite short. But I know that many countries know such system, and maybe there is also a challenge.
But maybe a next meeting for EGF, we should start with, we ask a policy maker what he wants to know from us, and a farmer. And then at the end of the meeting, we ask if he or they are satisfied. Maybe that's, I'm looking to Agnes, maybe that's a nice proposal to do something like that, yeah.
No, it's a great way to include the policymakers from different as well, maybe invite those at a more disadvantaged.
But also farmers.
Oh, farmers, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Without the farmers, there can't be any farming.
When you are in, for example, in New Zealand, you are on a grassland meeting, 25% of the meeting are farmers.
Same in Canada. So here we go. There's a suggestion for the next symposium. So you touched upon slightly climate change, and we heard today a presentation and research on patterns of seasons very changing quite rapidly, or not. Perspective question. But do you think that lay farming is adaptable to that changing seasons and moving, you know, seasonality, new patterns of seasonality?
Maybe partly. In some regions it could be, but of course the researchers also have to do some new research on maybe on annual legumes, more research. New varieties of annual legumes we use, and we know that perennial legumes are very good, but farmers didn't want to wait when the potential of perennial grasses or legumes in crop rotation shows influence. So maybe more annual, more strong, with more biomass from annual, for example, clovers or something. It's we'll need to do something also for researchers.
But that kind of leads as well to innovation in the farming as well, isn't it? So innovation of research methods that you use to predict and see and show the patterns, and farmers have to innovate at the same time. Are there any emerging trends, because we have 4 different countries, that you can see this innovation that can be adopted from the research perspective and the farmer's perspective? Yes?
Well, I think we already saw 2 already in short presentations of the EGF today. Philip was talking yesterday about using in biorefining, etc., or using grasslands and using the biomass to produce either biochar or also fiber for paper production or other building materials. And the other one that was today about the phytoestrogens, basically from red clover. And I mean, a lot of our research as well is also, or has been, or is partially, or whatever, on using bioactive herbs from forages, so that you find other uses, because as we said before, grasslands are not monoliths, right? And different people will have different uses. And if you have a purely arable farm, it would still be a great idea to have a grassland, but you won't have a use for the forage quality. So there will be, I think we will see a much wider spectrum of uses in the grassland, being it for biomass that can be used for energy creation, for building material, or for planting herbs and legumes with bioactive compounds that can be used as medicinal plants, and that can be either in human consumption like the phytoestrogens today, or in animals. So I think we'll just see a much wider spectrum of plants that will be cultivated and can provide different uses.
But how does that innovation and knowledge, again, going back to knowledge transfer, you know, how it can be, how the farmers, well, can find out and know and adapt it to their own needs? What are the next steps, in other words?
Okay, in this instance I do have to say I think there is a little more, in several of these things there are a little more research needed, but of course networking as well, because these steps are quite diverse. When we think about biorefining, for example, Denmark is already having large-scale implementation plans, but these are also more on highly productive systems, more intensive systems. Germany is experimenting a bit more with, in that project that was talked about yesterday, with more extensive systems, and now, I mean, re-wetted grasslands and biomass production from them is getting another issue. So I think it is difficult to find a simple answer to that question, because there are so many different strategies to so many different farmers, but and they are all at different levels of technology readiness. Some of them will be quite easy to communicate them already now to farmers, and then they can just go wild with it. But a lot of them, I would argue, there is still 10, 15 years of research required to get it to that technology readiness level that we can communicate to the farmers. But in the long run will open up new streams of income diversification, etc. But that's my guess.
Yeah, but maybe also, okay, there was mentioned the word co-creation, and you can say co-creation between animal production and arable, but you can also co-creation between farmers and researchers, and I think also that farmers, yeah, I think most of farmers have the skills, but also young farmers, when they go to school, they have to learn how to reflect on their work and adapt their system, and I think so it's not only our message, but they have to learn how they can implement this message on their farm, in their system, because we also want to diversify our system. When you look in the Netherlands, because of the rules and regulations, all systems almost look the same. And when you look, for example, to diversity in soil biology, the grasslands in the Netherlands are quite diverse, but they're all the same. But in a pasture, it's quite good. When you compare to a natural area, it's even better. But when you add them up, the diversity in our grasslands on our dairy farms is very lower than natural areas, of course, because there's no diversification. So I think we had to also to give the skills to the young farmers to learn how to adapt a message to their farm.
Yeah, I already forget what I think. Innovation. Yeah, I think, for example, in Norway is very seldom that we have in lace herbs. We usually have grass species and legumes, but thanks to this project, what we have together with the Legacy Net, then we also have tried now Sigori and Plantago, and I think it can be more future in our case that we have to mix. And yesterday when I was on this farmers circle, there is also some how to say, you see damages from the drought, but this Plantago, there is these plants where it's very dry, and we have to learn from nature what they can regulate and survive, and I think it is many possibilities. About farmers, I think in Norway they are quite eager. Sometimes they are coming with new ideas to us and trying and asking, and what do you think? And sometimes we are not in very well situation because we never heard about it. But it's very good because then we get this dialogue and then we can talk. I also think that precision agriculture, what is coming more and more, it's also coming in lace and grasslands and also in farms. I think that Norway is one of the countries where the most milking is by robots. Very few farms where there is no robotic system inside. and therefore I think these technologies, knowledge from what we have from agronomy and other things, it have to be combined and take the best one. And of course we are so different that it's very good, and we have to allow to understand that only also I can call for everything. Biodiversity is, I think, is some kind of key.
Yeah. Gilles, anything to add?
Maybe. I think that in farmers changes generations, and more youngest people also care about environment, and they want to do something good for that, and they they will use more and more sustainable technologies. So I hope that we could find some common agreement with farmer society, researchers and politicians.
So the innovation is very simple. It's technological, but at the same time it's collaboration and co-creation. So talking to other people and using the knowledge that has been adopted in other countries and trying to transfer what works in our countries. We have 5 minutes left, and then we'll have last question, and I would like to answer, on all of you to answer each. So what is the future of clay farming, and what we have to consider in each country? I would say, don't think about your country, because you know your country very well. Think about other European countries. So what is the future of clay farming? Maybe even how it can contribute to, European Union Green Deal strategy and others. You choose, but think about outside of your country on the reflection from the discussions you had today. So Nick, we'll start with you. You didn't have time to think, okay, just on the spot.
We talked about it 3 days. What is the future role of clay farming?
Exactly, and now this is the last question. You have to summarize what you have.
What I told already about the diversification, and Sidra was also telling already about species, animals, but we also we haven't talked about, for example, not very much about grazing on these lake pastures. When you see people from Brazil, they have all kind of systems where they are grazing on these lake pastures. So I think we have to. There's a good future for lake pasture, but we have to think out of the box how we can new systems and how we can utilize it.
Okay.
I think that lake farming has future. And more is organic farming system used, more and more farmers, so they have to have lake. And maybe another is farming systems like regenerative farming or carbon farming. I think that clay farming will come in our crop rotations in our farmers, for our farm.
I feel I still didn't have enough time to come up with a smart answer, but I guess my priorities would be to acknowledge that in order to adjust for different climates, we can already use the huge geographic stratification of experiments that we have. I mean, we have by now grassland experiments in the Mediterranean to up to Scandinavia, etc. So maybe we can already start learning from other sites with different climatic conditions in order to. And then one thing that was said, of course, very often, so for that, of course, the geographic co-creation.
That's a new word.
Yeah. Other than that, I think it is very important to really, as was mentioned as well, really change a little bit the way we develop mixtures, etc. To involve breeding companies to make sure that we can really fine-tune that a little bit better, and finally really just be prepared for the different users that will come up will always be a little bit one step ahead and try to drive the innovation rather than running behind it. I mean, that's a very generic and meaningless answer, to be quite honest.
No, it's not meaningless, I think. So the future is there, but this has a lot of challenges ahead.
I think that I will say what my colleague, retired researcher, says, that is nothing better than grasslands to increase organic matter in soil. And I will say LACE will have much more attention and much more, we have to use them, otherwise we are talking about surviving, I think. Because we cannot rely only on cash crops, on arable lands, everything in the process, in dynamics, and we have to have plants what have photosynthesis the largest part of the year.
So, thank you very much. The future of lay farming is there, it's bright, with lots of challenges, and we need to look at the geographical co-creation, co-creation between not only different continents, but learning from the best experiences. But at the same time, stepping outside of our own zone of the comfort, engaging the researchers from slightly different discipline to solve this question, think ahead 10-15 years what might happen or will happen, and probably the most importantly in this case is engaging the policymakers, the farmers more so, and keep repeating message in a very simple language. There's got to be survival if we're not going to do that now. Obviously, we don't want to be doom and gloom about it, because then everybody will shut us out, but the message has to be conveyed very carefully with an importance and the weight to it. I would like to thank you, my amazing panel. It was a pleasure to talk to you all. Let's clap. Thank you all very much. We're just on time to start the closing of the event.